Prospects podcast here on Penn State Sports Night. I'm Logan Bourandas, joined alongside, as always, Chris Lemmo. And Chris, how you doing today?
Pretty good. No Phil's jersey today, a rare off Friday for them down in Tampa Bay. Got to rep the minor league team, though. The Hartford Yard Goats went out to a game there last week. It was pretty fun. Nice ballpark. Colorado Rockies affiliates. I got to do some scouting work there. But it's a shame. Not a lot of MLB games today in general with this rain. It sounds like the roof is about to blow off. So if mid podcast there's a tree crashing through the roof, it might be mildly concerning. But other than the lack of baseball, pretty good.
Yeah, and that rain would, of course, be taking place in the world-famous Chris Lemmo attic. He's been recording his podcast there for the past couple of weeks here, and it's pretty good view there, I must say, looking at you in that Zoom screen.
It's a good podcast room, except for when it feels like the wind is about to blow the entire house down.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned not a lot of baseball for teams today, Mets being one of them. I am still wearing this Francisco Lindor jersey that I still have, still waiting for him to break out. Hasn't really been a pleasant start to the season for him, but the Mets off. They're supposed to play the Atlanta Braves today. So no baseball for either of our teams today. Didn't get to go to a minor league game recently, so I couldn't wear a Yard Goats shirt like you have right now, which still, by the way, one of the best names I've ever heard for a pro baseball team.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, also the fact that they had live goats in the outfield, pretty awesome. I mean, they lost something, it was like 14-3 or something. It was brutal. But they were goats, and it was a great game, or at least a great ballpark. So got to go to a Long Island Ducks game, though. Not quite the same name, but it's a pretty good name.
Yeah, I mean the Ducks are just kind of an independent league team. They're not really an affiliate to a major league team, but I did go to a lot of games there with the Ducks as a kid. Had a couple birthdays there as well. It was a pretty fun experience. But that is the with your stadium, the sequel to Angels in the Outfield. We have Goats in the Outfield with the Yard Goats. We'll talk about movies maybe on another podcast to talk about some baseball movies there. But moving on to some of the stuff we had take place this week. Chris, we were talking about it before the podcast. We seem to have this same sort of, I guess, hatred, you can call it, for this one man named Tony LaRussa, the manager for the Chicago White Sox. Last week, I criticized him for his little battle with outfielder Yermin Mercedes after hitting a 3-0 home run. Was kind of against that, even though it was his own player. But now there's some controversy in Chicago taking place that doesn't really involve LaRussa himself, but it involves his name. So there was a tweet, there was a Twitter post a couple days ago, and it kind of caught my attention. But there was this this lounge in the Chicago White Sox Stadium. It was formerly named Loretta's Lounge after Loretta, correct me if I'm saying her name wrong, Loretta Michelle. She worked in the concession stands for the White Sox for 60 years, and they dedicated that lounge to her after winning the 2005 World Series. And she was apparently a big help to the organization. A lot of people cared for her in that organization. But last week, they decided to change that name of Loretta's Lounge into LaRussa's Lounge. And this is a guy who was hired back to Chicago this past year, has only been back in Chicago for 2 months, and already has a lounge, which was very important to a lot of players, a lot of people in that White Sox organization. He already has a lounge named after him. I know there was some kind of tension in that organization in Chicago with that name change. But Chris, just overall thoughts on the White Sox, just hatred towards Tony LaRussa, and your thoughts on the name change.
Yeah, I mean, I think stuff like that, when you have workers for your organization like that for so many decades, I mean, especially these kinds of people that work, when you get people that work the concession stands, work custodial work across the stadium, those are the people that make the place go, right? I mean, the stadiums are not operating without those people. I mean, I don't care how much money the owner or manager might have, those are the kinds of people that make it go. So to kind of, I guess, disrespect what seems like a local icon to me is ridiculous, especially for a manager like Tony LaRussa that is just a fraud in my mind. I mean, he has no place in the game today. I mean, he's a dinosaur. I mean, he just doesn't seem like at all in touch with the way baseball is going, that which is a general problem with all the old heads really across the sport. I mean, there obviously is some value to people that have been around baseball for a long time, but Tony LaRussa is not one of those guys that I feel like is good to be imparting wisdom on your club, I would say. But no, my main takeaway for me is that, I mean, it's kind of disrespectful, I think, to be, you know, to have somebody's name on that club that has been there for, I think it was what, 60 years or something, and take it away for a guy like Tony LaRussa. I mean, not even a, like, I could see if it was some kind of, a bigger name, I would say, with the organization, but it's Tony LaRussa. I don't get it at all.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And obviously, even though LaRussa, he is a new manager in Chicago, he was there well before this year, but like he just came back to this White Sox team. But even still, the impact he's had on this club so far has been mostly negative, just in terms of like his view standing with the media. Not a lot of people liked the hiring to begin with. There were a lot of people questioning it, and there's always been this tension between him and a lot of those workers and players in that organization, which kind of shows that he hasn't really been getting. I don't know what the word for it is. Not really the best first impression, and it hasn't really improved throughout the season, especially after the Yerman Mercedes thing. Kind of showed that there was still some tension there in that organization. So it doesn't. It's not really like you're praising a Bill Belichick. Yes, you're praising a Hall of Fame manager in Tony La Russa, but he hasn't really given off the best impression in Chicago, where you have this worker who has been there for a long time, around 60 years, and was a big part in that organization and deserved to have that lounge named after her. Loretta did. So I feel like it was very disappointing and just a bad look from Chicago overall. And they've had a couple big storylines we talked about all season long. And most of that has been negative, which is not really a good look for a young rising team like the White Sox. And they're a competitive team. They're first in the AL Central right now, trying to make it back into the playoffs. But with that negative news that came out this week, there was a lot of positive news that came out today in terms of releasing their new jerseys, which actually look probably like some of the better jersey designs you've seen. So the Chicago White Sox recently released a new set of jerseys. Trying to find the actual picture right now of that jersey, but it's kind of a new style in that White Sox jersey. The front of the jersey says South Side in really cool font, I might add, and I feel like the font kind of is what makes this jersey stand out overall. And it's a black White Sox jersey with the white pinstripes. But Chris, we've seen the Marlins release all red jerseys before, but the White Sox now adding to this new thing in the MLB where they're going to be releasing a ton of these new jersey designs throughout the season.
Well, let me tell you, I better start saving up my money, because as soon as they drop one of these for the Phillies, it will be purchased. I mean, so from what it sounds like is Nike is doing, they're the City Connect jerseys. They did their first three. So they did Boston with the Boston Marathon one, which I guess the Boston Marathon, that one didn't make as much sense until I found out the Boston Marathon colors, I guess, are yellow and like a powder blue. So they had like the yellow jersey with the powder blue Boston on it. The Miami ones were awesome. It was a tribute to the Cuban Sugar Kings 1959 Junior World Series victory that I guess helped open the door for future Latin American players. And it's got that red jersey with the white pinstripes and the blue Miami on it. It's beautiful. I mean, and then it also has the Miami Marlins patch with the I guess the Sugar Kings logo on there. And then these now, the White Sox jerseys are really nice. I love the black jersey there. I think that, I mean, that's going to be a great jersey that should be worn a lot, I think, throughout the year. But then there's still a couple more to be released. So I think the next one, it says it's the Chicago Cubs, June 12th, followed by the Diamondbacks, June 18th, the Giants, July 9th, and the Dodgers, August 18th. So I guess 7 teams total will get it this year. But next year, I mean, I got to think that everybody across the league gets it, right? I mean, so far, I think they've hit on all of these. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think that they could do some really cool stuff with the next couple teams, especially the Cubs.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think they're 3 for 3 so far. They've hit on all of them. And I think the worst one, which really says a lot, was that first one, which is the Boston Red Sox yellow jerseys. And even those are still pretty cool jerseys to wear. And I was a huge fan of that Marlins red jersey. I was thinking about getting one myself, but now this White Sox jersey, I think even top that, which is actually pretty huge. I don't know who I would get for that jersey if I were to go with it, because they have a lot of young stars on that team and some young stars potentially coming up. I'll talk about that in a second. But this White Sox jersey is really cool, and it's a black jersey. I wish the New York Mets could do something similar by bringing back those black jerseys. I feel like when it's the Mets' turn for that, they could do something inspired by that. But I talked about White Sox young stars for a second. Staying in Chicago for one last time, there was some pretty big news that came out. I believe it was yesterday, where there was a report that came out that said the White Sox are currently favorites to land the quote unquote Cuban Shohei Ohtani with Oscar Colas during the next international signing period. He's a outfielder from Cuba, but Chris, I don't know how the White Sox turned out to be favorites so far, but be pretty big news for Chicago, a team that's got a lot of young talent on that roster already.
Yeah, it is big news, and it's interesting. I think that Chicago somehow has done a great job getting kind of this base of Cuban players. I mean, I believe I'm trying to think of all of them that are Cuban. I believe Jose Abreu is one. I'm trying to think if Yoan Moncada is, but I'm not 100% sure. But they do have a bunch of them that are, which is interesting because you'd think that Miami would kind of be the favorites to land a lot of those Cuban stars because they are so close. But the White Sox have done a phenomenal job with that. Now, I did hear about Oscar Colas that he may not want to pitch anymore. So it'll be interesting to see how the White Sox kind of deploy him here. It may be that they focus on him more as a hitter. And from what it sounds like is because usually a lot of these guys get signed when they're really young out of, any of the, Latin America, the Caribbean, any of those areas, they usually sign at like 15 or 16. It is actually crazy how young they get signed. But that being said, he's, I believe, 22. I think what happened is there was some kind of a dispute with his contract. I think he went over to Korea to play, and then there was some kind of dispute with his contract. So the White Sox, I believe he won't be joining their organization until next year, but he'll already be a bit more advanced than, again, some of these top guys. Like I know the Yankees got Jason Dominguez last signing period, who is supposed to be, another big Uber prospect, like a Wander Franco kind of guy, but he's a lot older, so he'll probably be up there pretty quick, which is good. I think it'll fit the White Sox timeline there very well because they're ready to compete now. They're not waiting for a rebuild at the moment.
Yeah, and this would be perfect timing for Chicago. A lot of the guys on that roster right now, you kind of mentioned it, they're either in their prime or they're slowly reaching that prime. You got Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert, Juan Moncada, guys like that who are on the younger side and just so close to reaching that prime. They could already be doing great things for Chicago. Then all of a sudden, this new Cuban sensation comes into the fold as they're still competitive, and I feel like that would be great for the White Sox, especially in that American League, which has always been so competitive. And whether or not Tony LaRussa is managing that White Sox team at that time will be up for debate, but it should be interesting once it gets to that point. Now, you something to say?
Yeah, I did want to comment. So actually, he would be their fifth Cuban player in that lineup. So this was a tweet from them back in August. It said the White Sox are the first team in MLB history to have a Cuban-born player in each of the top four slots in the starting lineup batting order in one game. So they have Luis Robert, Yoan Moncada, Jose Abreu, and Yasmani Grandal. So, I mean, pretty impressive that they kind of have that base. So easy to see why Oscar Colas, if he was indeed the guy, or if he was indeed, the one that picked to go to Chicago, easy to see why he would want to go there with a lot of, fellow Cubans in that lineup there.
Yeah, interesting that a lot of those talents are homegrown guys that they signed or drafted specifically. I mean, not sure what it is about Chicago or that White Sox organization that draws those Cuban players, Cuban stars, but we'll see if Colas can join that list. Now, something we've talked about these past couple of weeks in the MLB, and something that's been a big storyline all season long has been the injury bug. There have been injuries to some of the bigger stars really all season long. Some have been minor injuries, but there have been a lot more major injuries as of recent. Corey Kluber, he is sidelined for 4 weeks for the Yankees. Marcell Ozuna is going to be out 5 to 6 weeks for the Braves. And also in Atlanta, Mike Soroka is going to be out for the entire year now, where he's supposed to come back potentially later in the season. Noah Syndergaard for the Mets got hurt during a rehab assignment in St. Lucie. He probably won't return now until August, September range. And all those star players going down due to injuries. There have been a lot of more players getting hurt, including Jacob deGrom, who actually did come back this past Tuesday. I was at that game, pitched very well against the Rockies, pitched 5 innings. And Cody Bellinger is going to come back on Saturday for the Dodgers as well. But Chris, the injuries just keep on coming for for all these teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty brutal, especially for the Mets, who just lost Fargas in center field, and then they had to trade for Billy McKinney there. So they have a bunch of ex-Toronto Blue Jays now in a Mets uniform. But it's really bad league-wide. I mean, obviously, as you said, for the Mets, they now, I believe in the last week since our last podcast, I'm not sure if Pete Alonso was out last podcast or what, but obviously they've lost him now, and a bunch of these guys don't seem to be coming back very shortly. I think JD Davis and Luis Guillorme might be the first two back, although I'm not 100% sure on that. But I mean, everybody's really hurting. I mean, especially around the NL East. You look at a lineup like the Phillies, they're now without Bryce Harper, Didi Gregorius, and JT Realmuto. So not, quite as bad as the Mets, but still losing three huge bats in that lineup. And then you look at a team like the Marlins, they lost Brian Anderson this past series and Miguel Rojas, both in the series against the Phillies. Two pretty big pieces in that lineup down there in Miami, as well as a pitcher in Nick Neidert. And then really the only team in that division is the Nationals that isn't really banged up, because obviously Atlanta is without both of their starting catchers right now with d'Arnaud and Alex Jackson, although Jackson is on a rehab assignment, and Pache and Ozuna are both out, as well as pitching Soroka and Inoue. So the NL East is really banged up. I mean, it's easy to see why none of these teams have really jumped out, kind of grabbed that division lead. But obviously it's been a problem all across the league. I believe it just came out that Michael Brantley is now also on the 10-day IL for the Astros, and he was batting 305 this year. So, I mean, he's another big bat in that lineup. So the injuries have just been relentless. I don't really know how it's going to stop, but this is definitely a year where you have to have that kind of depth to be able to survive. And so far, the two of the best teams have been the Dodgers and Padres, which are the two, in my mind, deepest teams in the league.
Yeah, and the injuries have always been a huge problem for all teams in the MLB. And there are teams like the Mets who prepared for this situation by signing a lot of depth pieces like Kevin Pillar, Jonathan VR, Joey Lucchesi through a trade. But those players have all become major parts of this Mets team, and some of that depth has even gotten hurt. And that's been the case for most teams, where we're seeing some of these teams like the Mets sporting a AAA lineup, which I was there on Tuesday for the Mets game where they play the Rockies, another basically a AAA team, where there weren't really a lot of names to really be excited about. And the injuries have just been really bad for all these teams. And you're talking about the Mets, they've hit really hard by it as well, especially recently. I was on the LIRR back from the game where they traded for Billy McKinney after that Mets win, but the second he got traded, he was batting cleanup, which just shows how bad they've been hit by that injury bug. I mean, they'll be getting JD Davis back pretty soon. They're supposed to get Taijuan Walker back. He's supposed to start the Saturday game against the Braves. And then Seth Lugo should be back soon as well. So that's at least some of those names that are coming back. But I want to talk about the Mets real quick. Just something that I noticed while I was at that game. And obviously, the Mets, we talked about it before. They've been a very injury-riddled team. But one of the players that stayed healthy is Francisco Lindor. But he has not been hitting as of late, hasn't been hitting all season long, has a batting average in the 180s. And while I was there, every single time he got out, there were a lot of boos in Citi Fields. But Chris, he's going to be under contract for the next decade, maybe a little bit more. Do you think he deserves those boos every time he gets out and as this drought continues?
Um, you know, it would be hypocritical of me to say no, because I have been guilty of, booing Bryce Harper at times. So, I think that's just part of the game, especially in a big market like New York. It's going to happen. I don't, in a lot of other cities, like if you were to be playing in, I don't know, like Colorado or Seattle or Arizona, I don't think he'd be getting booed. I think they'd be kind of happy to have the big name star here and just kind of assuming he'll break out of it. But yeah, I mean, I get booing him. I mean, however, I do have to say, at least, he's a shortstop is one of those positions where even if you're not hitting, you can still really contribute. And his glove has been as advertised. I mean, it's not like a Bryce Harper or any corner outfielder where you're basically paying them for their bat. I mean, you're also getting that glove with it, and his glove is elite. I mean, he is one of the best defensive players in the game right now. So at least, he's still contributing to the team that way. So it's hard to be too tough on him. But yeah, I mean, it is concerning. I keep expecting him to break out of it, but he still hasn't. I mean, the other thing is his average exit velocity is definitely down. It's down at 89.7 according to StatCast. That's good for 141st in the league. And with that, his expected batting average is 226, so better than what he's batting right now, but still not all that great. He's only barreling up 4.5% of his pitches. So, I mean, he's getting mildly unlucky, but it's not like he's hitting the ball all that hard. I mean, ideally for a guy that's being paid that much, you'd like to see him up there with, a Paul Goldschmidt, Jose Abreu, Joey Votto, some of these names like a Freddie Freeman, somewhere in the top 100, and he definitely has not gotten a ton of hard contact.
Yeah, I do agree. Lindor has been unlucky. I mean, not like Cameron may have been unlucky, where he's still over 30 or something like that with the Mets. But there are some at bats, especially when I was there, where it showed that Lindor didn't really have a lot of effort out there on the plate. There were a lot of quick at bats. He struck out multiple times, and on those swing and misses, he didn't really show a lot of effort. And when he was walking back to the bench, I'll admit I booed him. I'll admit I have been a little disappointed with the way that some of those at bats have kind of finished off. And I feel like what really pissed me off as a Mets fan was from your number two hitter in Francisco Lindor on his very first at bat in the game with a runner on first, he bunted. The Mets literally had him bunt. A star player, they had Francisco Lindor bunt to try to move a runner over. That's something you do with a pitcher spot. That's something you do with an 8-7 hitter. That's not something you do with a two hitter that you're paying over $300 million for. That's the kind of stuff that pisses me off. I get that he's had a great season defensively, which he has. He's always been a great defensive player with the glove at shortstop. That I was never worried about. But it's the hitting stats that's starting to worry me. The power numbers have dropped off significantly, whether it's due to the different balls, baseballs being used or not. He still has around 3 home runs so far this season, which is definitely not what you want. He's been healthy, which is great for the Mets, but you have to ask for more from the bat. And it's a great sign for the Mets that Francisco Lindor is playing the way he is, and the Mets are still 2.5 games up as of right now in the NL East in first place. So hopefully the hitting stats kind of come around for Lindor, but the boos have been relentless so far this season, and part of that could be because of the New York media. I mean, we see how passionate those Knicks fans are right now at Madison Square Garden. That's just part of the way New York fans are. That's part of the way a big market is, but hopefully he can turn it around soon.
Yeah, I mean he's going to have to. I mean, looking also other stats here, offensive WAR, so wins above replacement, he's at 0.1. I believe for the season, his wins above replacement is 0.2, and his WRC plus on a scale, 100 is average for WRC plus. He's at like a 62 or something. You need him to be average at least for what he's being paid. And, statistically, he is at least average. I mean, he's statistically, overall 115, 120 WRC plus player and like a 5-6 WAR per season kind of guy. So he's usually up there, on the leaderboard, but he's not even close. Actually, right now for offensive wins above replacement, it's Vlad Guerrero, who has had a monster season. And when we do our end of May or end of the month awards next podcast, spoiler alert, he will be taking home an award from me. He has been fantastic so far. But I mean, again, for the money he's being paid, you got to hope he's offensive wise, a top 30 player in the league, and he's not even close right now. So he's going to have to figure it out for sure.
Yeah, and we'll see if he does. But now for something fun, which is kind of going to take up most of the end of the podcast here. Chris, I'm going to let you take over from here, but we're going to look at something that took place over this past decade and create our own all-decade teams from the 2010s, do a little snake draft in that as well. So, Chris, I'm going to let you take over from here.
All right. So a little bit late on this. Obviously, the decade ended, I guess, 2019. Although 2020 didn't really exist, so we're still pretty close. But so we're gonna go through here and draft at every position who we would draft on our all-decade team here across the MLB. So there was a list that came out from the MLB, but I don't really want to go through with that. I'm gonna kind of go on my own here. Fangraphs actually is a great leaderboard that you can do by position over the decade, and also I'm going to use that for a lot of the statistics here. But Logan, I'm going to let you have the first pick here. I don't know. Okay, we could go by position if you want. So do you have a position in mind you want to start out at?
I feel like we can start out at catcher since we can just like work our way throughout
Okay.
the hitting positions, then go into pitcher. But yeah, I feel like this choice is kind of obvious here. There aren't really a lot of hitting catchers that survived throughout the entire decade, but the one guy that's really had a great season as well this year, Buster Posey for the Giants. He was a part of 3 World Series teams this past decade. He won an MVP award in 2012, which isn't really something you see from a catcher position. So I feel like this is an obvious start, especially with an all-decade team. Buster Posey's been one of the more consistent players throughout his entire career, still playing right now, still playing at a great level right now as well, even after the year off. And whether or not 2020 is included in this, I think Buster Posey is a clear pick to start out.
Yeah, I do have to agree with that. Unfortunately, so the way we're going to do this, I think it would be kind of stupid since we're drafting teams to be able to draft the same players. So kind of took my pick there. That's all right. I'm going to go with Yadier Molina. I mean, he's kind of the obvious second choice here. I mean, just from a home runs perspective, he's actually third, I believe, for the decade behind Buster Posey and Wilson Ramos. But Wilson Ramos, I thought about, but he defensively was never as good as Yadier Molina. Yadi was one of the best defensive catchers of all time, and I think still is. Hit 287 over the decade with 121 homers. I mean, it's kind of impossible not to choose him. I mean, nobody caught more games this decade than him. He caught 1,291 games, 8 All-Star games, 7 Gold Gloves, and was obviously a part of that Cardinals team that won the World Series in 2011. So he's definitely a good pick. I mean, he's a surefire Hall of Famer, I have to think, right? I mean, I think him and Posey, quite honestly, could both make the Hall of Fame. I mean, both of them have great cases for it as some of the best catchers of all time.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Yadier Molina is more of a Hall of Famer from the standpoint of the defensive side of things, but he's always had a decent bat. And there are some seasons where he made the All-Star team because he put up high averages. And just like Buster Posey, he's always been a very consistent catcher behind the dish. And he was another guy who played the entire decade, which is uh, a big point in making an all-decade team. So I feel like those are the two obvious choices.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on here, I'm going to head up to first base. Now, first base was kind of a tough decision for me. Let's see here. Okay, so here's my list. The problem is whether you kind of count some of these guys that are DHs or not. I'm going to allow it if they played any games at that position. I'm going to allow it because there's one guy I have to draft, and he's probably, in my mind, the most likable player in the MLB today, and that's Miguel Cabrera. I love this guy. I mean, every time I see him on the field, he just looks like he's having fun. And, I mean, obviously a lot of the younger guys are kind of like that now, but he was really the first guy, I guess, in my mind that like really had a big personality back in the 2010s. I mean, some of the big stars from like the early 2010s, late 2000s, when he got his start, there was not a lot of big personalities in my mind. I guess Prince Fielder was a pretty good personality, but Miguel Cabrera is awesome. And he also has the stats to back it up, by the way. He was third among first basemen in home runs behind Edward Encarnacion and Albert Pujols with 268 homers. He had the best average with 317. So he was a phenomenal player. He had back-to-back AL MVP awards in 2012 and 13, including the first Triple Crown since Carl Yastrzemski in 1967. So I have to say, I mean, I think for me, he's again another one of those guys that is probably a surefire Hall of Famer, as we're going to see a lot up and down, the lineups that we're making. But he's my pick for my first baseman.
Yeah, and I feel like this is going to happen a lot throughout this draft, but you kind of stole my pick there, Chris. But I was looking at two guys, and I was kind of debating back and forth between two different guys on who I should draft at this spot. But the guy I ended up picking is Joey Votto with Cincinnati. And he was a guy who was very consistent throughout the entire decade. He won the 2010 MVP award, not a triple crown, but he did get that MVP at the very start of the decade. He was always a guy who was consistently good at getting on base. He always had a high average, and he was able to hit for high home run totals when necessary. had a couple good seasons doing that, and a lot of his seasons throughout this decade hit well over 300, including a 326 season in 2016. But in terms of home run totals, was only able to hit 20 home runs in one of those seasons, but he came very close. Excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong stat here, actually. He hit 20 more home runs in multiple seasons, but he had 36 home runs in 2017. That was his highest total. And the guy I was debating with between Joey Votto and this guy was Albert Pujols. But what kind of took me away from Albert Pujols was the end of the decade, as Joey Votto had a very consistent decade from the start into the finish as well. The only two seasons Joey Votto had a down year in terms of his numbers were the last 2 years, 2018, 2019. But even those years were still very good years. He had 261 in 2019, where Albert Pujols, he was already kind of towards the back half of his career with the LA Angels. So that kind of stowed me away from Albert Pujols. But Joey Votto, my pick at first base.
Yeah, I gotta say, there's actually kind of a sleeper pick here because he probably will be on this team. Listen, when we're doing top prospects in 2030, I'm picking Freddie Freeman, okay, as my first baseman. He's actually like on the leaderboard. I mean, for home runs, he's eighth, but 227 home runs and a 293 average. And by the way, Freddie Freeman only played 20 games in 2010. Like his rookie year was basically 2011. So unlike a lot of these guys who are in their prime the entire decade, really, Freddie Freeman really didn't enter his prime, I guess you could say, until quite honestly the later, the second half of the decade. So, I mean, he's a guy that definitely should be on this list in 2030. Is probably a sleeper candidate for the 2010s, considering what he did, especially the second half of the decade. But moving on to second baseman here, there's not a ton of second basemen that I absolutely love in the 2010s. If it was the 2000s, I'm picking Chase Utley, just kind of a homer pick there with the Phillies. Um, After he left Philadelphia, he had a lot of injuries. His age kind of caught up to him quickly. That will probably be what prevents him from becoming an all-star. Was kind of the back end of his career. He struggled a bit. But I guess my pick for second baseman, there's not a ton of great ones out here. I
I don't. I
guess.
don't want to make. I don't want to make this harder for you, but I think it is my pick.
Oh, that's true. It is your pick. My bad. My bad. Then you're going to take away the one name that I actually like on this list. Go ahead.
Trying to jump the gun there a little bit, but I think, yeah, there aren't a lot of second basemen here. There's two that I think will make the cut here. And I think the main one to look at is Robinson Cano. As much as he kind of fell off this year in terms of his PEDs, and it's kind of been a big problem with him throughout the decade, but when he has played, he has been probably the best second baseman in the MLB. He split it with three teams in the Yankees, the Mariners, and then the Mets for the first year. But almost every single year put up a very solid stat line. He had over 30 home runs twice, with his best season in that total coming in Seattle in 2016 with 39 bombs, 103 RBIs, and very close to a 300 average. He hit over 300 for the first 5 years of that decade. So he was a very consistent player in terms of hitting for average. And he made the All-Star team 8 times throughout the decade as well. No MVPs, but he was a very consistent player in terms of All-Star totals. And his worst year came in the very last year of that decade with the New York Mets, only hitting 256. But overall, very solid decade for Robinson Cano. Could be a controversial pick due to the PEDs, like I mentioned earlier. But overall, his consistency earns him a spot on my team, almost Chris's team because he jumped the gun, but still he earns a spot here.
Yeah, that was definitely going to be my pick. I did jump the gun a bit there. Um, God, yeah. I mean, looking through this list, I mean, if you're just looking at home runs, the top five were Cano, Dozier, Kinsler, Walker, and Odor. So not a star-studded list considering Dozier has been DFA'd a bunch the last couple seasons. Rougned Odor. I know I made this joke on one of our PSSN segments, but he hasn't made contact since he made contact with Jose Bautista's face in that infamous fight there in Texas. But you know, I guess sticking with guys that have been kind of controversial, I guess I'm going to go with Jose Altuve. So I know the whole trash can banging. I mean, yeah, I get that. Not great, but it seems like we're both going for guys that have a controversial history of potentially cheating a bit, but um, posted a 315 average over the decade and has 128 home runs. And if you look at wins above replacement for second baseman, he's third in the decade, behind Cano, who leads by a lot, and Ben Zobrist, who I actually did consider for a bit here. But yeah, I mean, he's been an offensive machine, Jose Altuve. I think the question is, a lot of people, look at his splits home and away and look at what he did last year and say, oh, is the trash can stuff. I mean, he has had a good bounce back year this year, so I'm not too sure about that. But I mean, he did have an incredible run. I mean, from 2014 to 18, so this was before, the Astros were even that good. I mean, he was still posting incredible numbers, when they were mediocre, like 2015, 2016, when they were, 10 games above 500, but not World Series contenders. So, yeah, I mean, he's had a great run. And again, is one of those guys that didn't even play a full season. He actually played 57 games in 2011 and no games in 2010. So, again, he missed part of the decade as well. So, he's going to be my choice, possibly an unpopular one, but there's just not a lot of great names. I mean, you could pick Dustin Pedroia or Zobrist, Kinsler, Howie Kendrick, but not great names for sure.
Yeah, not a lot of great names there at second base, and it's kind of unfortunate that the two guys we picked have a lot of that controversy there. But yeah, it's kind of unfortunate that there weren't really a lot of second basemen. Not really a strong position like a first base, like a catcher. We'll talk about third base pretty soon. It's not like a lot of other positions we talked about where it's pretty deep. But yeah, it's unfortunate that the two guys we picked have that controversy to them. But at the end of the day, they're both still very solid players. Robinson Cano, consistent all-star. Jose Altuve did win that MVP, although that may be an asterisk now at this point. But now I'm not going to jump the gun. I'm not going to skip your pick here, Chris. So go ahead.
Well, for shortstop here, I got to go with this guy. Was honestly one of my favorite players growing up, at least, outside of a Phillies uniform. I don't know. I just kind of love the way he played defensively. I think whenever I played shortstop growing up, I kind of wanted to be this guy or Jimmy Rollins. Of course, my Phillies bias there. But Troy Tulowitzki, I got to pick. He was phenomenal in his career, especially defensively. I think so much so defensively that his offense kind of goes underrated. He was fourth during the decade for home runs among shortstops with 160 behind Desmond, Hanley Ramirez, and Asdrubal Cabrera, who I wouldn't really think of as a shortstop, but I guess, yeah, he is considered a shortstop. But he hit 293 over the decade for wins above replacement. He, I believe, led all of the shortstops. Or was he second? No, he did. He led 27.8 wins above replacement. He was just a phenomenal player. Never had the strikeout rate really too high, career strikeout rate of 16%. I don't know, something about him. I love the way he always played all out. Those Rockies teams were actually a lot of fun. And it speaks volumes that I'm probably going to have a couple more Rockies on this list. And yet they haven't really done anything in the postseason besides before Tulo was there. I believe that was in 04 when they played the Red Sox. But Yeah, I mean they had some phenomenal teams with him, in the late 2000s, early 2010s. They had Todd Helton, who was another guy that was awesome when he was out in Colorado. But I mean, whether or not you believe the Coors Field factor, he was a phenomenal fielder, and I believe he was a five-time All-Star. He was five-time All-Star, two-time Gold Glove, two-time Silver Slugger. He did get a bunch of MVP votes as well, a bunch of years. So I think he's probably tops my list for shortstops.
Yeah, and I think that was probably the obvious pick there. Tulowitzki didn't play the entire decade, but when he did play, he was always one of the better shortstops in his day, back with the Rockies and the Blue Jays specifically. And after that, it kind of gets a little shaky as there aren't really a lot of shortstops that played the entire decade. There are a couple young shortstops. A lot of them are going to be free agents soon that played half the decade. I was considering the only one that really played the entire decade, Elvis Andrus. I considered him for a little bit, but he didn't really have a lot of good home run totals. So my choice became down to guys like Francisco Lindor, Trevor Story, Carlos Correa. And I'm gonna end up going with Francisco Lindor. It might be a homer pick here now since he's with the New York Mets, but he played this entire decade with his former team in the Cleveland Indians, and he played exactly half the decade Lindor did. We talked about him a lot earlier on in this podcast and a lot of previous episodes. He always had a great glove at shortstop. And in three of those 5 seasons where he did play in this decade, had over 30 home runs, which shortstops don't really hit for those home run totals. But he hit over 30 home runs in those seasons, capped out at 38 in 2018. And even in the seasons where he didn't hit for 30 home runs, had a combined 27 home runs in those 2 seasons and hit over 300 in those seasons as well. Just all around a fantastic player, could really do it all. Hit for average, hit for home run totals, could steal bases, had a great glove. He still has some of those things in New York, but back in his Cleveland days, back where he was becoming a rising star in the MLB, he was one of the best shortstops, if not the best shortstop in the MLB. So I think right after Tulowitzki, he ranks as the second best shortstop to play in the 2010s.
Yeah, definitely a lot of guys that didn't play the whole decade, like you said. I mean, Tulowitzki, I believe he actually put a couple games in 2019, but really after he went to Toronto in 2015, he really was not that good. So he put up numbers that led all shortstops, and he basically had from 2010 to 2015. So pretty amazing. He did what other shortstops did in half of a decade there. Couple other honorable mentions. I mean, definitely Xander Bogaerts has been awesome throughout his young career. I thought about him. What else did I think about? Actually, I mean, I wasn't actually going to put him on there, but Trevor Story's another one. JJ Hardy, one of my favorite Orioles in recent memory. Really appreciated him, especially with the glove there at shortstop. But two good picks there for sure. But Logan, moving over to the hot corner, who do you have at third?
Yeah, Chris, and this was the probably one of the one of the positions I was thinking about for quite some time now. And my choice is really between two guys in Adrian Beltre and Nolan Arenado. And I eventually decided to go with Adrian Beltre. And part of the reason why is he's played pretty much the entire decade. He retired in 2018, which he still played 9 out of the 10 years we're looking for with this all decade team, and he spent one of those years with the Boston Red Sox, the rest of those years with the Texas Rangers. He made 4 All-Star appearances during that time frame in those 9 years, and he had some really good power numbers as well. He was always a very solid power hitter throughout his career. Had 36 home runs he capped out at in 2012 during the decade, but he hit over 20 home runs in 5 of those seasons, and he always hit for double-digit home runs. And in some of the seasons, he had over 300 as well. So he always had some really solid seasons. And what kind of separates him from a guy like Nolan Arenado, Arenado only played half the decade. And Adrian Beltre always had solid seasons in Texas and in Boston. And the stats that he put up just made him the no doubter pick at third base.
Yeah, that was definitely the no doubt pick there. This is a tough one for me. I think I gotta go. I think I gotta go with Josh Donaldson. I thought about the two that I really thought hard about were Arenado and Machado. But like you said, they didn't really play a good part of the decade. I think Machado you could have made a bit more of a case for, quite honestly. Especially, I mean, he was in his prime, 15 through 18. He had over 30 homers per season. There it was just spectacular in Baltimore, and was good last year in San Diego. Has struggled so far this year at the plate, only hitting 228 in San Diego. So those were the two I considered. But Donaldson, I think, really has had that decade to remember for him. I mean, he actually, again, was not great early in his decade. In 2010, he only played 14 games. He really started hitting in 2012 and then especially in 2013. But he put up those huge numbers in 2015 when he won MVP. He was all-star. He was an all-star 3 seasons in a row, 14, 15, and 16 with Oakland and Toronto there. He also, I believe, is second in wins above replacement, just below Adrian Beltre there, hitting 273 during the decade. The strikeout number is a little bit higher than what you'd like, closer to 20%. But, I mean, it was definitely a close one. There's a lot of good third basemen in the game now that are still kind of younger and didn't really play the whole decade. Obviously, we mentioned Machado and Arenado, but Rendon is up there too. Chris Bryant is up there, although he's kind of moved around the field a bit. Justin Turner is another guy that is definitely in the top 10 for the decade. Maybe you could even fit him a little bit higher than that. And Jose Ramirez is another guy that's put up big numbers, and he's only played 770 games, which is kind of by far the fewest on this list. I guess Alex Bregman's up there as well. You know who's actually 14th on this list? Your man, David Wright, 14th for wins above replacement in the 2010s, despite not really playing a whole lot in the back half of the decade. But
he was kind of injured after like 2013.
Right. So, I mean, it's really impressive when you see these guys that basically are only good for half of a decade and are still pretty high up there on the leaderboards at their respective positions. But yeah, I got to go with Josh Donaldson here. I mean, he's had a great career, especially I think he kind of broke out with the Blue Jays there in 2015. Those teams were pretty electric too with the Blue Jays. I believe was the Jose Bautista team? I think it was that he broke out with there. They also had Troy Tulowitzki. So those teams were wild back there in the mid 2010s in Toronto. I mean, the bat flip there with Joey Bats, that was pretty iconic. But yeah, I'm going to go with Donaldson there at third base.
Yeah, and I think that's a good pick. I mean, it's really between him and Arenado. I personally would have taken Nolan Arenado just because his prime in the back half of that 2010s decade. I feel like that was overall just better than any season that Donaldson really put up in the 2010s. But the MVP award and just the Toronto Blue Jays days, it's kind of hard to ignore. So I definitely get where you're coming from there.
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to the outfield here. Hopefully you can't hear the rain. It is an absolute downpour out there right now. So hopefully my sound's coming through okay. But I'm very happy I get the first pick here, right? Yeah, okay. Because I mean I think the big choice here, I mean, I don't know, is there any specific order you want to go in for the outfield actually? Because this will determine it.
We can just do like any outfield position just 3 times. And like that's how we'll do it.
Okay. I think, well, not even I think. I got to go with Mike Trout. I mean, feels like he's the obvious pick. That's why I was hoping we weren't going to do like left field and center field. But 305 during the decade, 73.1 wins above replacement. I mean, he's a surefire Hall of Famer. He's got 3 AL MVP awards and 7 top 2 finishes. He's an AL Rookie of the Year, 8 straight All-Star seasons. I mean, he, in my mind, is still the best player in baseball. I mean, he is amazing. He's the player that, I mean, obviously, look, he's not the most exciting player. I think when I think of exciting players right now, I think of like a Fernando Tatis, a Ronald Acuna, a Shohei Ohtani. But in terms of who's at the top of my bucket list to see before he retires, it's Mike Trout, because he is going to go down as one of the, I think, 5 best players of all time. I mean, he is legitimately, he does stuff on the field that I know he plays for the Angels, so it's different. He hasn't been able to prove it in the postseason. I get all that, but he does stuff on the field that we may never see again in our lifetime. So it's an easy pick for me. I mean, both sides of the ball, he's insane. And I mean, he's in his prime right now, too. So I can't wait to see what this guy does throughout the rest of his career. And he's one of those guys that his farewell tour, whenever he decides to retire, is going to be must-watch TV for sure.
Yeah, I think that was the obvious pick. I mean, there were a lot of outfielders you could have gone with there, but Mike Trout is the clear way to start out any talk about best outfielders this decade. And that leaves you with a ton of options here to go with just for because I have back-to-back picks. So I have to go with 2 outfielders here, and I'm considering 3 names. And I think I want to get the just if this one stat clears, I just want to get the first name out of the way before I look at this second name here. But I think the way I want to start out this one is to go with Jose Bautista. And I think it is kind of a interesting pick here, but I love the way that he started out this decade. He had 6 straight All-Star appearances starting from 2010 to 2015. And the peak of Jose Bautista's prime is what really gives it to me. What really hammers home this pick. He led the league in home runs during those first 2 years of the decade at 54 home runs 2010 and 43 home runs in 2011. And he was able to hit 25 or more home runs up until 2015. And he had 20 home runs in the next 2 seasons as well. And even though he kind of tailed off during the 2018 season, where he had 13 home runs, which was the last season of his career, he still found a way to hit over 10 home runs in every single season he played in during the decade he played in. Didn't play in 2019, obviously, so he only played in 9 out of the 10 seasons, but he had solid seasons every single year he played for Toronto mostly. But overall, I think Jose Bautista is the way I'm going to start out this outfield. And I'm debating between a few different guys here with my next spot. And I think if I want to stay with the home run numbers, I might end up going with I'm deciding between Giancarlo Stanton and Bryce Harper. Those are the 2 guys I'm kind of picking between. There are a lot of guys out there in that outfield spot, but I think in terms of just who's been the better player during this decade, I think Bryce Harper's the way to go. When he came up in 2012, he was one of the best prospects we've ever seen in the MLB. He had an MVP award in 2015. He's always been a solid player, both in Washington and in Philadelphia, and he was always a consistent player. It was kind of tough for him to play a full season for Bryce Harper, but overall, whenever he did play, he was always the best player on the field that day, and he capped out at 42 home runs in 2015, which was his MVP season. In 2018, 2019, finished out the decade very strong with 100-plus RBI seasons as well. And what kind of separated him from Giancarlo Stanton for me, he had 2 seasons where he hit over 300. He was always a high average hitter, and he always hit around that 270, 280 range in most of his seasons. So I think that Bryce Harper is going to be my second pick here.
That's a good pick. I mean, I was with you. I was considering the kind of between Stanton and Harper. So, I'll go. You know what? I'll go Stanton. I mean, he has some of the best raw power in the game. I mean, just this year, if you look at his exit velocity, he by far for average exit velocity is the leader. The average ball he hits is 99 miles per hour. That is stupid. I mean, nobody in baseball, I think, has, even Aaron Judge, I don't think can touch Giancarlo's power. I mean, he hits baseballs probably as hard as anybody ever. I mean, I wish we had StatCast for like Babe Ruth, because I somehow I don't feel like Babe Ruth was hitting baseballs as hard as Giancarlo Stanton. I mean, this man, when he gets a hold of one, it goes a long way, and he's got the stats to back it up, as well. I believe, leads all right fielders in wins above replacement with 39.2. The strikeouts are a big problem for me. I mean, that was one thing that kind of I hesitated on. 28% strikeout rate in his career, average 268 hitter, but I want a guy that can hit tank shots, and he does just that. He hits tank shots. I mean, he 308 during the decade, second among right fielders, only to Nelson Cruz, who hit 346. My gosh, that man still rakes. But no, I mean, Giancarlo Stanton just has some of the best power out there. His 59 homers in 2017, I believe, are the highest single season total of the 2010s as well. He was the 2017 NL MVP award winner. So definitely has the credentials there. The biggest problem besides the strikeouts with me for that pick was his injury history. He played 18 games in 2019 and 23 games of the 60 in 2020. So barely played the last two seasons. That is kind of worrisome, but the rest of the decade from 2010 to 2018, he put up big power numbers. So especially Miami too. So, which it was tough to do, especially in that new ballpark. It's not at all a hitter's paradise in that new Marlins Stadium there. But moving on to my next outfield pick, this is a tough one as well, because he hasn't really played, a whole lot in the 2010s. But I think I got to go Mookie Betts, just because of such a strong second half of that career. I mean, the numbers he's put up are pretty incredible, nearly a 300 batting average over his career. I believe in terms of wins above replacement, which is one of the bigger, metrics that I've been kind of looking at, I want to say he's second. I got to pull this up now, because I believe he was second in the decade. Yeah, second to Giancarlo Stanton, and he's played about 400 less games than Stanton, with 139 homers there. He's also spectacular defensively. So I think I got to go with Mookie Betts. I mean, he was the AL MVP in 2018. He had four straight All-Star appearances. It's tough to do this because, again, you don't know how much to weight players with, only playing, 5 or 6 years of a decade as compared to like 10. But those 5 or 6 years he played have been so good that I think he's going to get my third outfield spot there.
Yeah, and I mean, the MVP obviously makes things pretty easy for Mookie Betts, but the choice I have here actually did play the entire decade, and he's one of the more consistent players to do it in that decade, Andrew McCutchen. He started out that decade with the Pittsburgh Pirates, then moved over to teams like the Giants, the Yankees, and the Phillies. But in eight of those 10 years in that decade, he hit for over 20 home runs in that season. He even had an MVP award in this decade as well. But he was one of the best players during that Garrett Cole, McCutchen, Pittsburgh Pirates teams that just couldn't really make it past those wild card rounds. But he was always a great center fielder, hit for high average, was able to get 20 or more steals in the first couple of years of that decade. But in terms of consistency, I think McCutchen was probably the top player next to Mike Trout in the outfield for the 2010s decade. Kind of cooled off a little bit in the tail end of his Pirates days, right before he got traded, but he still managed to be one of the more consistent players, one of the more consistent outfielders in the MLB today. So I think Andrew McCutchen, just in terms of being an all-around outfielder who played throughout the entire decade, gets my spot here, or my final spot in the outfield.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was probably, I would say that he was my runner up. I mean, he had a phenomenal career and is still going. I mean, in Philadelphia, not nearly to the same rate that he was, but in terms of just overall wins above replacement for outfielders, so including left, center, and right field, he's actually second. So it goes Trout, McCutchen, Stanton, and Betts. His career, I mean, over the decade, 221 for homers, 286 batting average. He was really impressive. I think people kind of forget that because of, maybe not being quite as impressive with the Yankees and Phillies, of course, now. But his stint with the Pirates, I mean, he was probably one of the better Pirates of all time. I would say, I mean, definitely in recent memory, considering how bad the Pirates have been. Quickly, I guess, if you want to do pitchers, we can. I guess who did the did I pick first? I'm trying to think who would pick first for this one.
I think I would pick first if we were to do starting pitchers. We can do three starting pitchers, then just finish it off with one reliever, and we can call that a podcast. But if I were to start out the starting pitchers, there's been this big three in terms of starting pitchers throughout the decade. And I could say, because obviously we're all going to pick them, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, Clayton Kershaw. I'm not sure it's in that order just yet, but I feel like just in terms of who had the better peak, I feel like Clayton Kershaw might get the starting nod for me. He had three Cy Youngs, which tied Justin Verlander, which no, it tied Max Scherzer actually. Justin Verlander had two, but what was different between Kershaw and Verlander and Scherzer, Kershaw won an MVP. No, none of the other two guys can say that. And he also had a triple crown like Verlander did, but I think the MVP was the big differentiator between Kershaw and those other two guys. He had a 301 strikeout season in 2015 as well. But in terms of who's had the better seasons, I think Clayton Kershaw kind of wins that starting nod. It's kind of tough to really say who had the best prime in terms of these three pitchers, but Clayton Kershaw is still doing it right now, and he really became a Hall of Famer after what he did in those 2010s. He came up in 2008, but he only had one season, which came at the last season of the decade in 2019, where he had an ERA over 3, and he barely had that with a 3.03 average, and he had 3 seasons during this decade which he had an ERA under 2, which capped out in 2016 with a 1.69 ERA. But just in terms of dominant seasons, Clayton Kershaw was the peak of consistency for this decade. And you can really debate back and forth. You can go on for days who really was the best pitcher in the 2010s decade, but I feel like Clayton Kershaw deserves strong consideration.
Oh, he definitely does deserve strong consideration. Now, I think I kind of have the benefit here of going with the other two, considering I get back-to-back picks. Now, if you are just looking at ERA, he's almost a full run better, Kershaw is, than Scherzer and Verlander. He's got a 2.31 ERA during the decade. Scherzer, who I guess I'll pick with my first pick, has had a 3.12 and Verlander a 3.10. Yeah, I mean, those are the big three pretty clearly. I mean, you look at Scherzer, he had an MLB best 2,452 strikeouts through 2 no-hitters. He had a 20 strikeout game, and he had, of course, a World Series championship during that decade, which Kershaw, again, that was kind of eluding him really up until last season, the shortened season. So Scherzer definitely, and by the way, he has 3 Cy Youngs. It's no big deal or anything, but um, he's been phenomenal. Scherzer, second in wins above replacement. He's a strikeout artist. I mean, outside of maybe Chris Sale, I think, yeah, he's second to Chris Sale for most strikeouts per 9 innings in the decade as well. So he's been just awesome. He's also been very durable. He's pitched 319 starts during the decade, which is up there with Greinke, Verlander, and Kershaw, I believe. Actually, John Lester tops all of them with 320 starts. But yeah, I mean, not much else to say about him. And then, Verlander, another guy that is going to be a Hall of Famer after what he did in the 2010s. I mean, 2 Cy Young awards, Triple Crown, World Series ring, AL MVP, 2 no-hitters, led his league to the AL in strikeouts 4 times, and he joined both the 300 strikeout season and 3,000 strikeout club in 2019. All these stats off of the MLB website there. So pretty impressive when they list on the site here his accolades. I mean, some of them I didn't even know about. I didn't actually know that was when he reached the 3,000 strikeout club. I completely forgot he reached that back in 2019. Yeah, I mean, he's been kind of another guy that's a model of consistency, third best in wins above replacement, 53.6 according to Fangraphs here. Pitched over 2,100 innings. I believe that's the most in the decade. So he's been a big workhorse for the teams he's pitched for in Detroit and Houston. So those are going to be my 2 picks there.
Yeah, and after I took Kershaw away from you, the choice became really easy between those 2 guys. Kershaw, Verlander, and Scherzer. They are the upper echelon of starting pitchers throughout the 2010s decade. And now the choice gets really interesting. I feel like there's 3 guys kind of debating with my 2 picks here. And the one I kind of want to get out of the way first is Chris Sale. He pitched the entire decade, started out his career in 2010, actually, played with both the White Sox and the Red Sox. It took him until the 3rd year in that decade to become a full-time starter. But once he did, he hasn't won a Cy Young yet, but he's come really close. 5 times he actually finished in the top 5 in that Cy Young voting. Yeah, it was actually 6 times he finished in the top 5, and he ended up winning the World Series in Boston in one of those years. So I feel like Chris Sale, he was, especially in the latter half of his White Sox career, was one of the best pitchers in the game. And he was always the guy who was on deck to win that Cy Young Award, could never do it, but it was always really close. And he always had some really solid seasons during the decade. And another guy I wanted to look at here, it's going to be between Zach Greinke and Madison Bumgarner. And I think the guy I'm going to look at here is the 3-time World Series champion in Madison Bumgarner. From 2010 to 2019, he never had a season where he had an ERA over 4, which is kind of the difference for me because Zach Greinke actually had a few of those seasons. And the postseason excellence plays a huge factor into my decision. I mentioned the 3-time World Series winner played a huge part in a few of those World Series titles, but he was just consistent. He never had an ERA under 2.5, but never an ERA over 4, and was always that guy the Giants could rely upon in the top of the rotation for all 10 years of that decade. So I think that's what kind of separates a guy like that from a guy like Zach Greinke, who did play for 6 teams during that decade. So that is going to cap out my 3-man starting rotation for the 2010s.
So I think I'm going to have to go since you picked Mad Bum. I really want to be a homer and pick Cole Hamels, and it's kind of close, but back half of the decade he did falter a bit. So I'm not gonna pick him. He'd be on like my second team all decade list. But I'm gonna go with Zach Greinke, 5th in wins above replacement. He's got he had a 3.18 ERA during the decade. I believe he was a 5-time All-Star in the decade. Yeah. And his 1.66 ERA in 2015 was the lowest since Greg Maddux posted a 1.63 in a single season. So what he's done has been insane. I know he had a couple bad seasons in there, but I think I got to go with him. The other one I was thinking besides Cole Hamels was Jacob deGrom. Now, you could basically put it on a plaque right now. He will be the top starting pitcher, barring some kind of unforeseen circumstance for the 2020s. Just the way he's going right now. I mean, he has a 0.8 ERA this season and almost 15 strikeouts per nine. It's ridiculous what he's doing. He's been posting the late 2019 or the late 2010s. In 18 and 19, he posted a 9-7 WAR season as well. So he was kind of close to making my team, but I'm going to go with Greinke for that last pick there.
Yeah, and I feel like the top six in terms of your starting rotation for this decade, it was pretty clear who's going to make that list, but it was just a matter of what order they would be picked in. And I did consider Jacob deGrom as well. Obviously, I did just the Mets in me kind of wanted to put him on that list. But when there's guys who played the entire decade and played really well during that time, it's really tough to kind of make a case for a guy who only played around half the decade and finished out the decade with those 2 Cy Youngs. So it was kind of tough for me to put him on that list there. But this was a stacked list for starting pitchers. And I mean, guys that didn't even get mentioned, guys like Corey Kluber, Jacob deGrom, as we just mentioned, Steven Strasburg, David Price. It was a really stacked list in terms of starting pitching.
Definitely, it really was. And I guess we're going to do one relief pitcher here, and I guess I get the first pick since we're doing the back-to-back thing here. Am I right on that? Yeah. Okay. This is kind of a tough one. I mean, obviously for the 2000s, it would have been Mariano Rivera. I'm going to go with Craig Kimbrell, I think, actually. 7 All-Star teams, 2011 NL Rookie of the Year with the Braves, won a World Series in 2018 with the Red Sox. His 346 saves are most this decade. So wow, according to the MLB.com article here, he had 540 save seasons, which Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, and Francisco Rodriguez are the only closers with that many. He also had a 50 save season in 2013. So Craig Kimbrell with the weirdest pre-pitching form I've ever seen, which, by the way, the videos of the fans, I think it was in Philly, mocking his setup is hilarious. But I'm going to go with Kimbrell as my closer here.
Yeah, and I think that was the top choice. And it really comes down to 2 names for my pick here, either Aroldis Chapman or Kenley Jansen. And I think I'm going to go with Jansen here as my closer. I don't know if you feel the same way, Chris, but I just loved when Jansen was at his prime. I feel like he was by far the best closer in the MLB, and he was one of the top pitchers in the MLB as well. He had 3 seasons where he had an ERA under 2. And I think what stands out to me more from a closer perspective is just the amount of saves. He just had more saves than Chapman, simply enough. And he had 340 save seasons, including 47 back in 2016, which was his high mark. But he was always that model of consistency up until really 2019, where he had a 3.7 ERA. That was his worst ERA total of his career to that point. But just in terms of consistency, I mean, you could really say the same thing for Chapman, but his save totals were uncharacteristically low. I mean, part of the reason for that could be just playing for Cincinnati for the first part of his career. But I feel like something else that kind of played a part into it was that they were so close together, just in terms of stats, that the fact that Aroldis Chapman barely played in 2010 and 2011 kind of played a big role for me as well. Only had a couple appearances in 2010 where Kenley Jansen had 25 games played in that 2010 season. So that was kind of the tiebreaker for me.
Yeah, by the way, Kenley Jansen, most strikeouts of any reliever in the 2010s. And I believe in terms of saves, he was second on that list to Craig Kimbrell. So a good pick there. It was kind of, I think, between him and Chapman, but I do like the pick.
Yeah, and I feel like there were a couple relievers that could really be in that spot. I mean, another guy like Zach Britton could have been considered, but obviously not trying to draft all day here with this like 25-man roster of all decade teams. I think we both run out of guys by that point, but this decade featured a lot of stars, and a lot of decades do. I mean, we've seen these past couple years, the guys that have come up, and we could even be talking about it 10 more years on the next episode of Top Prospects in 10 more years from now, doing this again for the 2020s. But we can only wait and see on that and see if the stars of those times were going to be living up to the guys we mentioned today.
Definitely. I mean, it's cool going through, especially the 2000s and 2010s, since this is the era of baseball that we grew up with. So to see a lot of the guys that, we watched play growing up and we kind of looked up to growing up is really cool to kind of look now and see some of them at the end of their careers, some of them in their prime, and see, just how great they were stacked up against some of the all-time greats.
And with that, that is going to wrap up this edition of Top Prospects here on Penn State Sports Night. For Chris Lemmo, I'm Logan Bourandas, and be sure to stay with us the entire baseball season for more updates from around the MLB and other stuff as well. So with that, that is going to be the end of this edition. Have a great day.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.